There are so many times when the world feels hostile. We know all too well that it is mounted on a scaffold of unjust systems which protect themselves from accountability or reform. In daily life, moments of common carelessness or casual cruelty intensify the feeling of an antagonistic world. The darkness feels inherent. And in truth, a world like this, where people prioritize themselves and their own, is hostile. We know from bitter experience that there is darkness in every person. This knowledge is in some ways defensive. Depending on the absence of that darkness is naive, even dangerous. You cannot rely on the world to extend a helping hand because odds are it won't. But too often, we draw the wrong conclusion from this. We regard the world as antagonistic, and therefore its people as antagonistic. We expect nothing from most other people, imposing no obligations on them, and in turn, they expect nothing from us, leading us to forget that we have our own obligations to them. We don't build up the muscle of thinking of others, being considerate of their needs, looking closer at them, and wanting to know them on a deeper level because it's not the way of the world. To have that muscle at all, we have to make a conscious effort to build it up. And I'm here to urge you to do exactly that. Because just as you cannot ignore the darkness, you cannot ignore the light either. Every person is an imperfect, mixed-up concoction of light and darkness. When you reduce a person to their darkness, whether to a vicious belief they hold or an inconsiderate action they take, you close yourself off from seeing their light. Think of your closest friends and family members. You love these people, you know them, you trust them. Now expand out to remember friendly acquaintances, colleagues, and neighbors. Perhaps you don't know these people so well, but still, you've seen their good-naturedness before in a kind word or a helping hand. You think of many of them as kind-hearted, funny, considerate, perceptive, creative, principled, or welcoming. In other words, you can see their light. Now think of all the people you've crossed paths with just once, but who nonetheless brightened your day. Maybe they gave you a compliment on the street. Maybe they picked up your wallet after you dropped it. Maybe they put you at ease in a waiting room. Maybe they offered you grace and let a mistake slide. Or maybe they simply offered you a smile. For each one of these people, you were lucky enough to see their light in one brief moment. These people are evidence of the light inherent in humans, just as strongly as the world's man-made suffering is evidence of the dark. Now zoom out even further. Just in your block live hundreds of people you don't know. In the city live 8 million others. In the state, 20 million. In the whole country, 342 million. You don't know them. You've never personally had the opportunity to see their light. But others have. Maybe their loved ones know them as the loyal one, or the nurturing one, or perhaps the inspiring one. They know they are imperfect, but they also know that there is something wonderful to love about them. They have seen both sides of them, not just their darkness, but also their light. Every day, you cross paths briefly with so many people you don't know, like the person sitting next to you on the train or the cashier at the grocery store. You don't know them, but when you see them, you have to imagine their light anyway. You have to fill in the blanks and treat them the same as you would treat someone you are lucky enough to know very well. You have to treasure them, the same as you would treasure your own loved ones because they are someone else's loved ones. But sometimes this is a challenge. Could you see the light in a complete stranger? What if they were dirty, unkempt, or a criminal? If they were wild and filled with a bitter resentment? If they had turned their back on society long ago? What if they were dangerous? This is what the bishop faces in the reading earlier when a filthy, rage-filled man walks into his home. In times like this, when it is most difficult to see another person's light, it is all the more important to do so. That man, Jean Valjean, has spent 19 years treated as less than dirt, dehumanized, reduced to his crimes. And darkness feeds on darkness. He too has lost sight of the hardworking, honest, fiercely caring man he used to be. In all these years, he has not met a single person in his journeys who was willing to look past his darkness. In truth, his light is hard to see, almost gone. But even so, the bishop treats him as though he can already see it. When the bishop welcomes Jean Valjean in, offering him food and shelter and calling him brother, his actions go past simple compassion. To Jean Valjean, they are life-saving. They tell him that even with all of his darkness, he is still a human being deserving of decency and dignity. He does not deserve to be abandoned by society. And just as darkness feeds on darkness, light feeds on light. The bishop's revolutionary recognition of Jean Valjean's light reminds Jean Valjean too of the nascent light shining within him. It reminds him that he can and must be a better man. And this gives him the strength necessary to change his life around. As Unitarian Universalists, we all know that we must be guided by love in all things. We know we must affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we want to be radically welcoming. But even so, at times, we find it difficult to live our values out. Sometimes we are afraid. Sometimes we are angry. Sometimes we are exhausted. This is when it is hardest. But that doesn't change your obligation to do so. Even so, you must recognize the light in every person, because it is the only way we can build a world community, one with peace, liberty, and justice for all, as championed by the former 6th UU principle. I want to take a moment to drill down on what exactly we want to build, what a world community really means. Being a community brings a shared responsibility for our collective future. It also brings the might of our collective power when we stand united. And it brings a collective obligation to every member of our community to affirm their inherent light. That is community, a collective future, collective power, and collective obligation. That collective obligation is not necessarily to like each person. It is not to let their beliefs, if harmful, go unchallenged, or their actions, if cruel, be excused. The obligation to affirm someone's inherent light is independent of their darkness. It is not the calculation of their light and their darkness, weighing each out against the other to alternatively condemn or venerate them. Instead, even when their light feels overshadowed by the darkness you've seen from them, you cannot treat them as if that light isn't there. And even when you can't see their light at all, you have to treat them as if you just haven't seen it yet. The obligation to that person is to believe that, like every person, they have something to offer our community, something unique or joyful or kind, something that brings light into even one person's life. It is to treasure that light, all the more so in the face of darkness. Or, as the bishop would put it, it is to treat them as your brother. When we work to build a collective future for our community, that future includes all of us, every single member of the world community we hope to live up to. You are fighting on behalf of every person. You cannot name any person or any people as the enemy, because that reduces them to their darkness. Even people who you fundamentally disagree with on a moral level, you cannot label as the enemy. We must remember, it is not people who we fight against, it is ignorant ideas and unjust structures instead. Keeping that distinction is critical, because reducing a person to an enemy abandons them as worthless, hopeless, as a lost cause. It abandons all hope of reconciliation, killing the possibility of a truly universal community. And it flies in the face of your obligation to treat that other person as a member of your community, as someone you are ultimately fighting for. You cannot reduce someone to their darkness, because it is impossible to build bridges out of darkness. And even when others are the ones to label us as the enemy, we have an obligation to reach across those battle lines and break them down. We cannot accept the splintering of our world into the bleeding lines of us versus them. We must recognize the light in every person and reach out to this. And we have to do this, even when we don't expect them to do the same. We have to keep this door open in the fight for a better world. When we stand united and build cross-border alliances, that is when we are able to tap into our collective power to support our community. That is when we are strong enough to make change in our shared world. It is within this compassion that knits together a community that the divine can be found. Victor Hugo writes in Les Mis, "God is behind everything, but everything hides God. Things are black, creatures are opaque. To love a being is to render that being transparent." When you make an earnest effort to understand someone, to look at them clear-eyed and see their light and their darkness, you can see that every person is holy, every person is sacred. You can see through to the divine spark of life that burns within each person. And the connection you make through the act of understanding is sacred too. It persists past one moment between two people, rippling out to animate love and community on a broader scale. When we recognize the light in someone, we do not ignore the darkness. Rather, we set the stage to build the community that will heal that darkness. So after this service, as you go about your day, look around you. Make eye contact. Truly see the people who you come across for who they are, fellow companions on your life's journey. Treasure them as though you can already see the light that illuminates their soul.